Hello friends, I'm Jackie Fox. Welcome to my live video. Today, as I've done before, I'm going to be sharing with you an article that I wrote for fulcrumpolitics.org, which is an organization that fights for increased prevalence and raising the profile of third parties within the state of North Carolina, which is a movement that I think that we desperately need to catch on nationwide. So if you are coming to this from outside of North Carolina, I would encourage you to consider speaking to people or trying to start a similar organization in your own state. This week, our prompt, which is now live on fulcrumpolitics.org, you can go and read the articles that myself and my libertarian right counterpart wrote in looking at the differences between our left and right perspectives on these issues. Actually, I usually don't find a lot of commonality with the libertarian right, but in this particular case, I actually found myself agreeing with a lot of the things that my counterpart was saying in his article. For both of us, it really came down to the idea that police need to be more along the lines of civil servants instead of law enforcement officers, and that they need to be better integrated into their community. And on this occasion, I think that he also had some good ideas. In the confines of writing a 1 to 2 page article, I didn't include, not because they weren't great ideas, but just because I listed the things that came closely to mind and didn't have the time to write out all of the ideas that I have on reforming police. In addition to that, I would like to point out that I think that there's a lot of additional things that we need to do in criminal justice reform. I'm going to be posting a live video where I'm debating my counterpart, Ian Freeze, on a number of these things in relation to our previous article on the Minnesota protests. So give that a look when it comes out. But in the meantime, let me read to you my current article for Fulcrum Politics, which, again, I want to say the prompt here is what I would do as chief of police. So that kind of limits the tool set that I really have the ability to enact. If I were the chief of police of a small town, what would my priorities be? Well, the first order of business seems to be making sure that police officers wear and use body cameras. Too many questions of impropriety during arrest come down to he said, she said, and in court, the police are an authority in a way that a civilian is not. This skews the system to the police's favor in incidents involving bad behavior. However, if body cameras and footage were available, the camera would act as an impartial witness. Second, I would take claims of police brutality seriously. There should be no us versus them mentality in a police department. We are all one community. So instead of placing the police on a pedestal, I would welcome community feedback on how they may appropriately do their job. I would also follow that by working with local community leaders to identify projects that the police can participate in as civil servants. This could range from a number of things that are typically outside of what we think of as the police's duties. This might involve police distributing food from food banks to people who have told our department that they need it. This might include doing some of the heavy lifting to assist in the formation of community gardens. Officers could participate in community events. Perhaps officers could read to children on the weekends at libraries, for example. The benefits of those ideas are twofold. One, it shows the community that the police are indeed there to help them. But it introduces the police to a community in which they enforce the law. Tearing down the traditional barriers between police and community would encourage hesitancy and violence in interactions on both sides, because you're far less likely to attack a friend or someone you perceive as a friend. It would be one of my main goals as the chief of police to change the perception of the police as crime fighters into civil servants. This would increase the police presence within the community instead of just having them drive around looking for things to do and people to arrest. Instead, they would be helping people until they were called on to act. I think that using the police in this way would utterly change the dynamic of the police department in the community. I would also hire staff lawyers to teach the police in an ongoing way what the laws are that they are actually enforcing. Often we find that police do not understand the laws because their training is nowhere near as rigorous as that of a lawyer. And I think that that is something that I would hope to change within the community that I serve. I want the police to understand the rights of the people so that they are less likely to violate them. Traffic cops would have an increased focus on helping motorists in need and responding to their needs quickly, as opposed to sitting in place at speed traps waiting for opportunities to raise money for the state through ticketing. Many of these ideas would either lower the income of the police department or raise the amount of money that it would spend. This could be offset by decreasing spending on militarization, decreasing policing in minority neighborhoods to match the overall policing within the community, and decreasing the size of the police force as needed. No longer would citizens see police officers sitting around and collecting a check or hanging out at gas stations. The police that remained would be directed to do what they should do in their downtime to benefit the community. And if by some chance there was money left over in excess, I would encourage the community through participatory budgeting to tell us how to spend it on projects that would benefit the community. I would also make calls to the state and national government to utilize the National Guard as a source of labor for these type of projects. I wouldn't call them in on protests, for example. I would call them in to help form community gardens and the like. Because not only do I think that the police need to change their relationship to the community, I think the National Guard should as well. After all, I think it's the highest ideal of the police that is worth keeping, is the idea of civil service, instead of just law enforcement. So, there we go. And again, that's not a complete list of the ways that I would seek to change the criminal justice system. That's just a short list, what I could fit in the article of what I would do personally if I were a police chief. So if you want to see some other ideas, my counterpart also wrote a good article on this. One of the ideas that he worked into his article that I kind of wanted to steal from mine, but I want to keep these separate and not have us stealing from each other and homogenizing our ideas, is the idea that police should only work in the community in which they live. You know, you're a lot more accountable if you're policing your neighbors as opposed to policing a community that you don't live in or have connection to. And a big part of that, one of the economic concerns that wasn't addressed in that article that I, from a leftist perspective, would like to add, is the fact that the reason that this doesn't happen in a lot of communities, especially a lot of bigger cities, used to happen a lot and probably still does in LA, happens a lot in New York City, is that the police just don't pay enough for you to be able to afford to live within that community. So a lot of police officers being relatively poorly paid compared to what they're really should be being paid if they do their jobs correctly, can't afford to live in those communities, and therefore they have to commute to work. And I think that that creates a partiality. It creates a sort of us versus them mentality. And I think that the biggest thing that could be done at a super local level to reform the way that police interact with their communities is getting rid of that us versus them mentality on multiple levels. You know, like, these should be civil servants. That's my take, basically. And that we need to redefine the role of the police within society to where they are civil servants. So I kind of hate this idea of thinking of them as LEOs or law enforcement officers instead of civil servants, because I think that that takes away from what they should be doing for the community and puts them in a more militaristic or a more aggressive authoritarian position, where I would like to see them working on behalf of the community instead of against it. So, if you thought those ideas were cool, go check out the articles at fulcrumpolitics.org. You will probably enjoy at least parts of my counterpart's article as well. And if you like what Fulcrum Politics is doing, either in its broader mission or bringing you articles like this, remember, it's an organization that you can make a charitable donation to. Even if you're a libertarian out there trying to avoid paying taxes, charitable donations are a great way to offset your taxes. So just remember, if you do donate to fulcrumpolitics.org, you can write that off on your taxes. Just saying. That helps you send a couple dollars their way. If that makes it easier for you, go for it. See ya.
I'm Jackie Fox, and my content will always be ad-free because I'm eschewing corporate donations to the channel. I just ask that if you can donate a little bit of money on Patreon like these fine, foxy folks, or if you want to make a one-time donation, you can donate on Ko-fi. If you're looking for another way to support the channel, I'm also making Fox hats with my logo on them. They are currently in the design phase, and I'm willing to allow people to ask for customized hats. Prices may vary depending on the cost of labor to manufacture them, because I want to make sure that my workers are paid fairly. But I am happy to say that the next few months, if you're a patron who has donated to this channel, I will be counting all of your donations against the cost of your first Fox hat, allowing you to get it at a discount.